What is up, YouTube fam? Robbie C here, and today I want to show you why I choose to putt from long distance with a polecat. But before we dive in, we have to ask the most important question of the day. How you doing today, Daniel? You having a good one?
So catch me if I fall.
All right, so ladies and gentlemen, when you don't have a lot of distance in your game, you have to kind of work on putting. Putting has to become sort of a confidence point for you. And I would say that is definitely one way that I've built my game, is to try and make myself a confident putter. Because, once again, if I don't have the distance, I'm gonna lose strokes to the rest of the field who throw farther than me. And one of the things that's gonna end up happening most often is I'm gonna end up in some longer looks. I'm gonna end up with some longer, try to birdie attempts, whereas the rest of my card, if they're landing at 25 and 30 feet off the tee, well, they're putting for birdies. But if I'm someone who doesn't have the distance that they have and I'm a little bit longer away, my 25 and 30 foot looks may be for par. That was very kind of you. It really wanted me to show that it likes to go into the basket. But as you can see, hit 2, miss 3, and there's some frustration there, because when this becomes a strength of your game, you want to lean into it. On the days where the strength of your game is off, it almost, I feel like, makes the bad parts of your game sting even more, because it's like, well, I can't throw far and I can't make putts today either, so like, why am I even out here? Now, what brought up the idea for this video is I was having a discussion with 2 friends last night talking about when do you switch putters, and I think when they were talking about switching putters, they were talking about like, I'm putting with Wizards, and in what world would I consider switching to putting with something else like PA3s or daggers or that course. But then another friend mentioned that he actually switches to putting with a dagger instead of his normal putter when he immediately starts thinking as he walks up to the putt, this is a long putt, I need a little more glide to get there. So he's an individual that actually carries 2 different types of putting putters in his bag for the reason of those longer looks. He wants to have a little bit more of a chance. And I think that I feel somewhat similar, especially when I have a longer uphill look at a putt. When I'm looking at those putts, it gets really tough for me to think about putting Wizards, especially these guys are fresh. And at the time that you're watching this, we actually have, with the logo on them, Birdie Fam Wizards, available at foundationdisc.com. It's the first time, actually, I want to say in the entire history of the Robbie C channel, that we've ever had just the logo stamped onto a disc. Kind of love the off-centeredness and the small stamp, kind of what we did with Dennis. If you'd like to see that on other molds, comment down below what you'd like to see it on. Maybe we'll get them run. But I like using the polecat for that exact reason. I have in countless tournaments played and made long birdie attempts and birdie looks by putting with this polecat sort of up and at the basket. Now, with these fresh Birdie Fam Wizards that are a little more overstable and not as seasoned in, unlike the blue ones with Topanga on them that I've been putting with for the past year, these are going to fade quite a bit more, which can cause some issues, especially from distance. I'm gonna have to give so much more extra pop that it distracts me from sort of keeping and hitting my line, because I'm so focused on that. And that's where the polecat really shines. And I wanna go over some options real fast that you should consider when you're trying to make longer putts. Now, the first thing to consider are the pros and cons of sort of what is the distance between me and the basket. If I have wide open space, it becomes a lot harder, especially if wind's blowing. Let's say if I'm putting with something like the polecat that has a lot more glide, as I go to putt it, if it's wide open and the wind is ripping, this thing becomes a lot more unreliable in the wind, and I have to get used to sort of a much loftier approach, which isn't as consistent. See, tried to replicate the same line, but I gave it a little bit more. Because we're out here exposed in the wind, it gets tougher. Now, like I said, where I really like the polecat is on those more uphill looks. If you go back to the putting championships, there was one of the holes where it was this box that some people were playing as quadruple mando, but once again, the course designer said we didn't have to. Uphill look at it, I was able to just zip my polecat right up, right at the basket. Because I don't really have to worry about it fading or dropping in, I can just pop it straight up. Now, from a longer distance, if I'm trying to do that with my Wizards, I have to, in order to get them to fly straighter, I have to give them so much more pop, and you can even see on that one right there that it's still faded out at the very end of its flight. That one I didn't give enough pop because I was more focused on throwing it straight, and of course, it was short of the basket. Now, I think it's important to make a caveat that is super, super vital And that is, I don't think we should be watching like Gannon Burr and the top pro putters and think that we should be replicating their percentages. If you're out here telling me that you are better at 35-foot putts than you are at 20-foot putts, I think we've got a problem systematically with your game, because while 35-footers are gonna happen, I think it's going to still take more strokes off of your game to work on the 20-footers. And we can take this same principle and apply it to 20-footers. From a 20-footer, hopefully the putter that I've chosen to putt with on a regular basis, I am able to get to a nice flat spot and allow it to go into the basket. Obviously the first one didn't go great, but I'm able to send a putt, and inside of 25 feet, I should really almost feel no difference whatsoever in what I'm putting with. Now the wind will obviously have an effect on this, and that's one of the biggest reasons I switched away from daggers, because I felt like if there was any wind when I was putting with daggers, I felt like I was actually putting with a kite or a balloon. I don't know why that one specific putter, I'm just not actually firing out of my hand, but that's fine. But from this range, I should be able to, from a straddle, I should be able to, from a stagger, not have to think too much about what I'm trying to do with these putters and be able to fire them directly at the basket and get a consistent release every single time. And if I make all of those putts and in, we've actually done a theory testing video on this before. If I can make all of those putts and in, I only have to be able to throw, I think I said like 200 feet or 250 feet with accuracy. And from there, I can shoot 900 rated golf very comfortably. Even if I make a 35-footer or two, let's say I have 4 every round and I make 1, that's just icing on the cake. All I need to be able to do is get it from 25 feet or 20 feet and in, and be able to make these consistently over and over again. Obviously, because I'm shooting a putting video today, I decided to putt super bad. Life happens. Even the best putters in the world end up having off days. Not that I'm the best putter in the world. Do not think I'm saying that. Now, when it comes to choosing your putter, let's say you want to switch to something else. I think there's pros and cons to this. The pros and the cons of having a putter that you use from longer range, like let's say back here, like what I do with the Polecat. One of the pros is that when I'm putting with the Polecat, it's a confidence sort of blanket or a security blanket that I get, because from this distance, I'm telling myself I'm putting with the Polecat. And if I'm able to make it, that's sick. That's icing on the cake, because man, that would be awesome. Even those 2 Halo Polecats are in different stages of wear and tear, and so it's different adjusting that flight. If I pull out my regular putter, I know that I have confidence with this thing because I've chosen it as my standard putter. But let's say I'm putting from this distance and I get a terrible shank like I just did there. I've now missed with both of those putters. When I'm putting with the Polecats, or something that's different than my traditional closer putt, I am almost associating the miss. If I'm in a healthy mental state, I can somewhat tie the miss to that putter. And I can also say that when I'm pulling that putter out from longer distances, they're low percentage putt opportunities. So I have more of a mental forgiveness when trying to approach those, which allows me to have more confidence in my putting overall. Whereas let's say I run it right back to the same scenario. I line up my Polecat putt and I'm like, okay, cool. And I send that and I miss it. The next time I step into a Polecat putt, I can tell myself, okay, that one, you didn't really give enough. You need to give it more pop the next time you go. And I can try to make the adjustments from there. Boom, still didn't give it enough pop. Better line, better look. However, let's say I step up with this Birdie Blend Wizard and I'm like, okay, here we go. Time to send it, give it some pop. Ooh. Okay, that was too high. That was too high. Let's say that's my first hole. I step up and now I'm putting from 20 feet and I'm grabbing this putter. The familiar feeling that I got the first time that I grabbed this type of putter today was that I missed high. So right now, where did my mind immediately go to even having this conversation? My mind went straight to this portion of the basket. So because of that, I could get distracted and be focused on that and think, okay, that's fine. Just don't send it high. Don't send it high. And then I could early release it. I could soft it because I don't want to give it enough pop to get there. And now I've missed a short putt. And now I've missed 2 putts in a row with my putting putters, which is going to demoralize me really, to lower that confidence. And if you spend enough time out there practicing your putt, you should be able to almost turn your brain off because you have repeatable patterns and repeatable motion that you're doing, that you're able to replicate that putt over and over and over again. I think one of my favorite examples of knowing how to lean into a pattern or a routine that you have and then not letting the situation affect it was truly when we were at All Stars with Foundation this year, and we were in a team competition, and I end up in a putt off to win the putting competition with Christian. We both step up from the same spot. We both miss our first putt, and I'm going to adjust. Now Christian goes first, and he throws his putt and he misses it. And I have a smile on my face, and Trevor goes, "Oh, it's over. Robbie smells blood in the water." And it's because I knew what adjustments to make, and also I know my putting routine so well that I'm able to step up and fire that. Now that was a shorter putt, so I was putting with Wizards because that's comfortable for me. When I was in the putting championships, I only honestly felt that bad about some of my longer looks, and it's why I originally ran one setup where I was trying to win that competition with actually 2 polecats and a Birdie Blend Wizard, because this is what I'm used to putting with, but I found that the style of putts, the winds, things like that just didn't accommodate for it. Now let's play devil's advocate for a quick second and talk about what is one of the cons of having a different putter, because I know that it might sound silly, but because putting is so mental, those first couple examples are when I think one of the biggest reasons that I think it's great to either have a different version of your putter or something like that that you can switch between. One of the cons is that familiarity of putting. When I'm putting, the hand feel between putting with a polecat that feels so deep and so peanut butter lid-esque, and the difference between putting with a Wizard is drastic. This is my putting grip when I hold and I'm putting with Wizards, and then when I go to putt with polecats, you can see personally I feel like these 2 fingers are actually a little more spread out trying to grab hold of it because I can't really pop. And also even this finger can have a little bit of an adjustment because there's not a bead for my finger to settle in, as opposed to when I toss this up, I know exactly where that bead is resting in my finger every single time. So I'm gonna get a consistent release on this over and over again, which is gonna create some consistency in my putting performance because I have the same grip, the same things. So if you're putting with 2 different putters, it almost could be a jack of all trades, master of none, where you don't really have that confidence. I think of an example personally where I was playing in a tournament with a lot more wind, and on some of my longer circle 2 looks, because there was a ton of wind, I was actually putting with Precious Child, and my brother was caddying for me at that event, and he kept telling me, "Robbie, I think we're making a mistake putting with the Precious Child because you're not making any of them." It's true on multiple levels. I wasn't making any of them, so that's not good. I wasn't adjusting them, and yeah, it just created some issues overall. It could be argued that I know I've missed some circle 2 looks before because maybe I stepped up and I was like, okay, traditionally I might putt with a polecat from this distance, but it really would have been better for me to just stick with the Wizards that I know and give them a little more pop and get the action and fade out of them that I was looking for. But I do think there's a third and final point that we want to consider that kind of sits in the middle ground that might help you determine which way you want to fall in this debate. To me, I think the hardest number to really trust in disc golf is that second number in the flight numbers, and that is glide. When I step up to a fairway driver and it tells me that it has 6 glide, I'm thinking to myself that it's going to go a pretty good distance. And there are discs that have claimed a certain amount of glide that do have the glide, and there are discs that have claimed a certain amount of glide that don't have glide. I know a host of Berg lovers who will say that the Berg has 0 glide, and they actually think that's true. And then there's a whole host of other Berg lovers that are like, yeah, I think the Berg actually does have glide, and I lean into that. Which is why there are people out there that actually putt with the Berg inside the circle. I think one of the biggest places that I feel glide matter is on putter specifically. There's a reason that Banger GTs, PA3s, they don't seem to have a ton of glide or loft to them. One of my biggest frustrations I had when I putted with Lunas for half a year was that I couldn't figure out how to get the glide engaged on them. Half the time when I threw the Lunas, I feel like they didn't glide at all. And then if I gave it a little bit, they turned into daggers and they were gliding a ton. And that inconsistency for me to be able to figure out that glide made me not have a lot of trust in the disc. And so there are folks who don't really have a powerful putt, and so they need the help of the glide, especially inside of the circle. So they're going to choose a disc like the dagger or something like that that has that extra bit of oomph or that extra bit of push that allows them to have that comfort inside the circle. Now, I'm not saying that it's a bad thing if you love that glide inside the circle. I would say Ricky Wysocki is probably one of the better putters in the world, and he putts with daggers from all ranges. So no, putting with a glidey putter is not like a sign of weakness or a sign that you have a bad putt. It's just a personal preference. While I enjoy having a putter that has a good amount of glide to it, I kind of like when they're kind of neutral or in the middle because it forces me to have to engage and throw my putt, and I can't get lazy while I'm throwing my putt if I actually want to see these things get all the way to the basket. See, there, short once again. and we're able to pop the putt a little bit more and get it all the way there. So I would say if you're deciding whether you want a longer putter, maybe if you have a putter that you prefer to use inside the circle that's low on glide, I think this option could be really solid for you, especially when you find yourself outside the circle and downhill, where it seems like you've got to give the putter everything that you have in order to get it up to the basket. And the best part about this is that I think for this putter, I probably, if I'm having a good round, I probably still end up using a polecat as my long range putter once during the round. If I'm having a bad round, I probably am still gonna only end up using it maybe 3 to 4 times over 18 holes. And like I said, because I can sort of associate the confidence with this and disassociate if I'm missing putts inside the circle, or don't view these as things affecting my putting, because it's already just a different feel and expectation when I pull the polecat out and I'm trying to putt from range. That usually means I'm not expecting to necessarily make this anyways, but this gives me my best chance of making it, which is just like a huge confidence boost, especially if I see it go in the basket. It is very common if you play around with me that at one point during the round, you're gonna hear me yell, polecat putt. If I could find glow polecats, oh my goodness, my glow bag would be so close to my actual bag. So as we wrap this video up, what are the takeaways? What are the highlights? The takeaways are, find a putter that you like, first and foremost, that you putt well with inside the circle. You can find this and find that confidence that you're not sitting here having to think about these 10 to 12 foot putts and they're just automatic, and you can fire them over and over again. That's gonna create so much confidence on the rest of your game, because we start at the basket and work backwards. And then depending on what putter you've chosen, if you find yourself often in those longer distance putts where you're like, hey, I don't really have the distance that the rest of my crew has, and I really would like to try to make more of these, then I highly suggest working on, we've talked about that flick of the wrist upshot. Another beautiful part about the polecats for me is that that is the disc that I prefer to use for that flick of the wrist upshot. Connor calls it a little frisbee toss, but this putter really shines for me in that slot and that opportunity. But regardless, I want you to find a putter that you feel like when you have this, I really like leaning into these high glide putters. And if you don't like the polecat, totally understand. I really would suggest checking out a Dagger is a great high glide putter. I personally feel like any of the P2 clones, whether it's the P2, whether it is the Agent, whether it is the Alpaca, those are all phenomenal discs that have a good amount of glide to them. And honestly, another sneaky contender that's pretty, they used to be a lot more popular, and based on sadly circumstances that are going around, probably be able to find them pretty cheap recently soon. Judges can be a pretty cheap alternative as well that have a decent amount of glide to them that you can really test out for those long range putts. But find that one that works for you, find that consistent spot, and then just mess around with it. You want to make sure that if you're a push putter, you want to make sure that you're not going to, when you're going to this sort of one, you're not like whipping the wrists and trying to do this on the throws. That's something that I try to work on when I do putting lessons with folks. I try to make sure that we eliminate that sort of, if you want to go straight push putt, that you're not figure eighting, as Strauss called it. But I really do think that just having an extra putter in my bag has made putting more fun overall. And another little side perk as we wrap up the video, I really think it makes putting practice more fun as well, because then you can actually practice with these longer putts. So you can have a day that you step up and you're like, hey, I'm going out there for 25, 30 minutes today, and I'm just practicing with my Circle 1 putters, and I'm using these over and over again. And maybe you, if you're feeling really confident at that range, you push it back a little bit and you practice with your Circle 1 putters from edge of circle, from mid Circle 2, things like that. Just because I'm in Circle 2 doesn't mean that I'm not putting with the Wizard. It's very situational, but because I've practiced a lot with both of them, and I'll have a day where I go out and I'm like, I'm just for 20 minutes, I have a stack of polecats next to me, and I'm just practicing 45 and beyond over and over again. I associate that with this disc, and I've tried 45 footers with these as well. It's really up to you, but it gives you that switch up opportunity so that you're not just doing the same old every single time, and putting practice becomes super boring over time. So I hope this video was helpful and not too rambly. I really do believe in the polecat as a putter. I love it. I wish more people would give it a try, and Circle 2 especially if you're trying to putt. Circle 2 and beyond, Circle 3, it's amazing. But I want to know, do you have a second putter in your bag that you use for long distances? Or are you one of the people that, let's say you're like this situation where I have two putters that look almost the exact same, but one of them has a little ink on it, and so I know this is my Circle 1 putter, and when I have those longer looks, I may use this that I know is a little more stable, just because it hits the chains a little less than this one does, because I use this as my main putter during the round. Maybe that's your approach. I'd love to know in the comments below. Thank you so much for watching. Hope you have an amazing rest of your day. Please make it fantastic for someone else too. But for now, we're gonna leave you with the bird.